You're too trusting for your own good, Marlene. That's what my younger sister Claire told me one humid September morning, standing in my kitchen in her robe, sipping coffee like she had all the time in the world. She'd just found out that my best friend, the woman I'd once considered closer than family, had taken $4,800 from me and disappeared like a puff of smoke over the Savannah River. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her she didn't understand, that Denise Parker wasn't just some acquaintance. But the words lodged in my throat because the truth was already sitting heavy in my chest. Claire was right. My name is Marlene Graves. I'm 63 years old, a retired high school English teacher. I've lived in Savannah, Georgia my entire life. I still live in the same pale yellow craftsman bungalow I bought with my ex-husband back in '89, with its creaky porch swing and the magnolia tree my mother planted when I moved in. The neighborhood hasn't changed much. Old houses with peeling paint, neighbors who wave when you walk by, the smell of fried catfish from Ms. Lillian's kitchen 2 doors down. I know these streets like I know the lines on my hands. I know where to get the best pecan pie, who'll fix your lawnmower for half price, and whose dog will bark at you no matter how many times you say hello. And for more than 20 years I thought I knew Denise Parker. We met in 2001 at a church fundraiser. She was new in town, freshly divorced and trying to start over. I'd been through my own divorce a few years earlier, so I knew that particular kind of exhaustion in her eyes. We clicked immediately. Coffee dates that turned into wine nights, thrift store treasure hunts on Saturdays, endless phone calls dissecting everything from men to politics to the best way to keep banana bread from sinking in the middle. She was the person I called when my mom died, the one who drove me home from the hospital when I broke my ankle, the one who sat on my porch with me through the longest, hottest nights of that awful summer I thought I'd never get my life back together. And I did the same for her. That's what friendship meant to us. Or so I thought. It was a Tuesday in late April when she showed up at my kitchen door. No text, no call, just the sound of her knocking, quick and uneven. When I opened it, she was wearing sunglasses, and I could tell from the way her chin trembled that she'd been crying. She took them off and her eyes were red, rimmed with black mascara smudges. "It's bad, Mar," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I wouldn't be here if it wasn't serious. But I need some help. Just this once. I swear I'll pay you back in 2 months." I'd seen her broke before. We'd both had times when we were counting change for gas, but this was different. Her hands shook as she sat down and she couldn't meet my eyes. "How much?" I asked, already knowing I was going to say yes. $4,800, she whispered. She said it like a confession, like saying it out loud might make it less impossible. I didn't hesitate long. That was my first mistake. I told myself it was just a temporary loan, that she wouldn't ask if she didn't truly need it. I wrote the check, my name curling across the paper like a promise, and pressed it into her cold hands. She hugged me so tightly I could smell her shampoo, coconut and something floral, and she whispered, "You don't know what this means to me." 2 months later I got a text. "Next week, promise." Then another. "It's been crazy, I'll call you soon." Weeks passed. No calls. No visits. My voicemails went unanswered. By August I drove to her apartment complex on the south side. The blinds were drawn, her name was gone from the mailbox, and a young couple I'd never seen before answered the door. They'd been living there for 2 weeks and didn't know anyone named Denise. I sat in my car in the parking lot with the Georgia heat pressing through the windshield, the steering wheel hot enough to burn. My mouth was dry, my stomach tight. I wasn't just realizing she'd left town. I was realizing that Denise, my Denise, had taken my money and vanished without a word. That was the moment the warmth I'd always felt for her started to drain out of me. In its place, something colder, sharper, and far more determined began to take root. For the first week after I found her gone, I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. People don't just vanish on friends they've known for 2 decades. Not without a good reason. Maybe she'd had a family emergency. Maybe she'd gotten sick. Maybe her phone had broken, her email got hacked, her car died, all at once. But the thing about reasonable explanations is that they start to sound hollow when you're the only one trying to believe them. I left more voicemails. My tone shifted from concerned, "Hey, just checking in, I'm worried about you," to a little sharper, "Denise, please call me, we need to talk." I sent emails, Facebook messages, even an old-fashioned letter to the P.O. box she'd once used. Nothing. By mid-September the worry had hardened into something else. Not just anger. though there was plenty of that. But the unsettling weight of realization, she wasn't coming back on her own. And if I wanted my money back, I was going to have to be the one to find her. Claire stopped by one afternoon, bringing a lemon pie she knew I wouldn't eat when I was stressed but insisting I keep it anyway. She listened as I went through the list of all the ways I'd tried to contact Denise. When I finally ran out of words, Claire leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms and said, "Mar, you need to stop treating this like a friendship problem. This is theft." The words sat there between us like a lead weight. I'd never thought of Denise that way, not in 20 years. She'd been reckless, sure, a little dramatic, prone to bad decisions. But a thief? My mind pushed back against it. Still, I couldn't ignore the facts. I had the bank statement with her account number. I had the text messages where she spelled out the exact amount she was borrowing and when she'd pay it back. And now I had nothing in return. That night I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fans spun lazy circles overhead, the sound of crickets bleating through my open window. I thought about the times Denise had been there for me. The hospital visits, the porch talks, the laughter over things so small we couldn't even remember them later. Was all of that just a performance? Around 2 a.m. I sat up in bed with a sudden, simple thought. If she left, she had to go somewhere. And if she went somewhere, there would be a trail. The teacher in me, the one who'd spent decades showing teenagers how to dig into a research paper, woke up. I opened my laptop, made a pot of coffee and started searching. I typed her name into Google, into Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I found old posts, photos from years ago and a lot of dead ends. But then, buried in the people you may know section of Facebook, I saw a profile picture I didn't recognize. Same first and last name, but her hair was shorter and she was wearing big sunglasses. And the location under her name? Jacksonville, Florida. It wasn't proof, but it was a thread. And if there's one thing I know about threads, it's that sometimes all you have to do is start pulling. The next morning I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, jotting down every piece of information I still had on Denise. Old addresses, phone numbers, the names of her sisters, the street where her parents used to live in Macon. It felt strange, like I was preparing a lesson plan, except this time the subject was her. The Jacksonville lead nagged at me. Why there? She didn't have family in Florida, at least not that I knew of. And the only time she'd mentioned Jacksonville was years ago, when we took a road trip down to St. Augustine and stopped for lunch at a diner off I-95. She'd complained about the heat, the traffic, the flatness of the city. I typed her name into the white pages online, filtering for Jacksonville. Nothing current, but one listing from the past year caught my eye. Same name, different middle initial, tied to an address for a small apartment complex on the west side. I copied it down. Then I tried Instagram again, looking closer at the profile photo I'd seen the night before. She was holding a drink, something pink with a slice of lime, and behind her, blurred but unmistakable, was a neon sign that read Riverside Lounge. I'd never heard of it, but Google had. A trendy rooftop bar in Jacksonville's Riverside district, popular with the sort of people who posted their cocktails online. It was a start. I called my neighbor Calvin, the retired cop, and asked what he thought. He didn't laugh at me, not once, which told me he was taking this seriously. "Marlene, if she's in Florida and you want to go after her money, you're in small claims territory," he said. "But the first step? You need a current address so she can be served. Without that, you've got nothing but stories." I knew he was right. For the next 2 days I became someone I barely recognized. I combed through Facebook tags, friends of friends lists, anything that might show where she'd been and who she was with. I found her in the background of a group photo posted by a woman named Trisha Benton, a name I vaguely remembered from one of Denise's birthday parties years ago. The caption under the photo read, "Girls' Night. So good to catch up with this one. #Riverside Lounge, #Jacksonville Nights." There she was, arm around Trisha, smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. It was the first time since April that I'd seen her face. And it did something to me, not sadness, not even anger. Just a quiet, steady certainty. I was going to find her. And she was going to pay me back. By Friday morning, I'd read every menu review, event listing and photo tag connected to Riverside Lounge. It was starting to feel like I'd been there myself. I knew what their happy hour specials were, what the patio looked like at sunset, even that the bartender's name was Luis. But none of that got me an address. That's when Calvin knocked on my door holding 2 coffees from the corner cafe. "You're still digging?" he asked, setting one in front of me. "Good. But you need boots on the ground, Marlene. People leave trails they don't even notice when they think they've gotten away with something. It had been a long time since I'd done anything that might be considered investigative. My world these days was farmers markets, church bake sales, and keeping the weeds from swallowing my back garden. The idea of driving to Jacksonville to find her felt big. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I called the Riverside Lounge, told them I was trying to send a gift card to a friend who'd been in recently, and asked if they could help me confirm her last name for the envelope. The hostess hesitated, then said, "Oh, Denise? Yeah, she's in here all the time. Lives a few blocks over." I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the phone for a long moment. A few blocks over. That was enough for Calvin. We pulled up Google Maps, dropped the pin on Riverside Lounge, and started scanning every apartment building in a 3-block radius. Calvin pointed to a squat, sand-colored complex with peeling blue trim. That's the kind of place she'd go for, cheap enough to not kill her, close enough to walk to the bar. I called the leasing office, posing as someone thinking about moving in, who wanted to ask a tenant about the neighborhood. The receptionist rattled off a couple of residents she thought might be happy to give a tour. Denise Parker was one of them. It took everything in me not to slam the phone down and cheer. That night, I sat on my porch swing listening to the cicadas, thinking about what I was about to do. I could drive down there, confront her face to face, but what would that get me? An argument? A slammed door? More empty promises? Well, if I was going to do this, I needed to do it in a way that couldn't be ignored. The kind of way that came with consequences if she tried to wriggle out again. I opened my laptop and started reading up on Florida's small claims process. By midnight, I knew the filing fee, the limits on the amount you could sue for, and exactly how to have someone served. Denise had made her move months ago. It was my turn now. On Monday morning, I printed out every scrap of evidence I had. The bank transfer receipt, the text messages where she promised repayment by June, and a timeline of every unanswered call and message since. I slid them into a neat folder the way I used to organize essays from my honor students, except this time my grading rubric was the Florida court system. The Duval County Clerk's website said I could file in person or by mail. I chose in person, not just because I wanted to be sure it was done right, but because part of me wanted to feel that weight of action. Filing papers isn't dramatic in the movies, but in real life, it's the moment you go from complaining to doing something about it. Calvin insisted on coming along. We drove the 2.5 hours to Jacksonville in his old Ford, the windows down, the air heavy with that mix of salt and heat you only get near the coast. I clutched the folder the whole way like it was a lifeline. The clerk was a middle-aged woman with glasses perched halfway down her nose. She scanned my papers, nodded a couple of times, and said, "All right, Miss Graves, that's a solid case. All we need now is a good service address." I gave her the sand-colored apartment building's address, holding my breath. She typed for a moment, then smiled. "That's valid. We can have a process server deliver the summons within 48 hours. 48 hours. After months of silence, I was 2 days away from letting Denise know, officially, legally, that she was being called to answer for what she'd done. I paid the filing fee, signed the paperwork, and stepped out into the blinding midday sun feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Calvin patted my shoulder. "She won't see this coming, Marlene. And that's the beauty of it." The process server called me that evening. A gruff, no-nonsense man named Ray who sounded like he'd been doing this since the Nixon administration. "I can get her tomorrow night," he said. "You want me to be discreet or make an impression?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted it quiet, professional. But another part of me, the part that had replayed her disappearance in my head for 10 straight months, wanted her to feel the weight of this moment. "Make it so she remembers," I said finally. Ray chuckled. "Consider it done." The next night, just after 7 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was Ray, his voice tinged with satisfaction. "Served her at the bar. Right at her table. She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon." I hung up and sat back in my chair, a slow smile creeping over my face. For the first time since April, I felt like I wasn't chasing her anymore. Now she'd have to run toward me, straight into court. It didn't take long. 3 days after Ray served her, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. "Marlene? It's me." Her voice was softer than I remembered, almost shaky, like she was testing to see if I'd slammed the door on her the way she'd done to me. I didn't answer right away. Let her sit in that silence for a moment. I just got this paper," she continued. From the court. I wish you'd told me you were upset. I almost laughed at that, but I kept my voice steady. Denise, I told you I was upset 10 months ago. What I'm doing now. This is me taking it seriously. She tried to sound indignant. You didn't have to go this far. I've been dealing with a lot. I just needed some time. You had time, I said, keeping my tone level the way I used to when a student tried to talk their way out of a late assignment. You had my number, my email, my address. You had every way to reach me, you just didn't. There was a pause and I could hear her breathing, fast and uneven. So what now? You're really gonna drag this into court? I'm not dragging it anywhere, I said. It's already there. The court date's in 3 weeks. If you want to avoid standing in front of a judge, you know what to do. For a moment I thought she might hang up. Instead her voice dropped lower. I can get you some of it next week. Not some, I said. Oh. Plus the filing fee. She huffed out a breath, somewhere between frustration and disbelief. You've changed, Marlene. I smiled to myself. No. I just stopped making excuses for you. When we hung up, I felt a strange mix of adrenaline and calm. I'd half expected her to come back with some story about a sick relative or a lost job, something that might make me second-guess myself. But she hadn't. She knew exactly why I'd done this. And judging from the tremor in her voice, she knew I wasn't backing down. I walked out to the porch and sat in the swing, the late afternoon sun cutting long shadows across the street. For the first time in months, I wasn't wondering where she was or what she was doing. She knew where to find me now. It started 2 days later. First came a text from Trisha, the same Trisha who'd posted that smiling rooftop photo. Hey Mar, maybe you and Dee could talk this out? She's been really stressed. I didn't reply. I knew what this was. The opening act of the Let's Make Marlene Feel Guilty routine. Then Calvin got a call from someone we both knew at church, saying Denise had mentioned she was about to lose her car, and couldn't believe an old friend would put her through this. That one almost made me laugh, as if I'd given her a $4,800 loan just so she could turn it into a sympathy contest. By Sunday, I got a voicemail from a number in Jacksonville I didn't recognize. A woman's voice said, Marlene, I know you don't know me, but I'm a friend of Denise's. He's going through a really hard time. Maybe if you dropped the case, she could start paying you something little by little. I deleted it without listening to the rest. This was the same pattern I'd seen in my teaching days when a student was caught cheating. First denial, then excuses, and finally enlisting others to plead their case. It didn't work in my classroom and it wasn't going to work here. That week I sent her one final message. Denise, you have until the court date to pay the full amount plus fees. After that, I'll let the judge handle it. No more discussions through friends. No threats. No drama. Just facts. Calvin nodded approvingly when I told him. You're keeping control. She can't spin the story if you don't give her anything to work with. I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a part of me that wanted to unload 20 years of friendship history on her, to make her hear exactly how deep the betrayal went. But this wasn't about closure. It was about results. And results came from keeping emotions out of the driver's seat. The court date was 2 weeks away when Calvin stopped by one afternoon, looking more serious than usual. He set his phone on my kitchen table, screen facing me. Got this from a buddy in Jacksonville, he said. It was a grainy photo clearly taken from a distance, but there was no mistaking her. Denise hauling a large rolling suitcase into the trunk of a silver sedan that wasn't hers. Looks like she's about to take a trip, Calvin said. Or leave town. My first thought was that she might be running from the court case. In small claims, if the defendant can't be served or doesn't show, the judgment still goes through, but collecting becomes harder. And that was the part she was probably counting on, making herself just inconvenient enough to disappear again. I spent the evening pacing my living room thinking through my options. I could call her and demand to know where she was going, but she'd either lie or hang up. I could wait until court, but by then she might be across state lines. Finally, I opened my laptop and sent an email to the process server, Ray, explaining the situation. Within an hour he called me back. She's playing games, he said. If she skips, we can still get a default judgment, but it'll take longer to collect. My advice. Lock her down now. Lock her down. Yeah. Serve her a second time with a notice of intent to collect. Reminds her that even if she leaves, she's still on the hook. Sometimes it spooks them into paying before they think about running. The next day, Ray confirmed he'd found her at the same sand-colored apartment complex. She was loading groceries into her car when he handed her the envelope. According to him, she froze mid-motion, read the first few lines and muttered, "You've got to be kidding me," before slamming the trunk. That evening my phone lit up with her number again. I let it ring twice before answering. "You really want to ruin me, don't you?" she said. "No," I replied calmly. "I just want what's mine." There was a long silence on the line. And for the first time I thought I heard it, the faint crack in her confidence. The following morning she called again, this time at 8:15 sharp, as if catching me early might soften me up. "Marlene, listen," she began, skipping any pretense of small talk. "I can get you 2,000 by Friday. The rest. I just need more time." I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring out at the magnolia tree in my yard. "We've already had that conversation," I said. "It's all or we go to court." "You're being unreasonable." Her voice cracked on the last word. "Do you know what kind of pressure I'm under? Do you know how humiliating it is to have someone served in public?" "I do," I said evenly. "And I also know what it's like to have a friend vanish with $4,800 of my money. If you're feeling pressure, that's because you created it." She went quiet for a moment, then tried a different angle. "You and we've been through so much. I was there for you when your mom died, when your ex left you." "Yes," I interrupted. "And I was there when you lost your job. When your heat got shut off. When you needed help moving across town. But that's not what we're talking about now, is it?" Her sigh rattled through the line. "You've changed, Marlene. You used to care about people." "I still do," I said. "I just stopped letting people take advantage of it." There was a sharp click as she hung up. Calvin, who'd been sitting at my table pretending to read the paper, lowered it with a smirk. "She's cracking," he said. "You keep holding that line, she'll break before the court date." I wasn't so sure. Denise had always been resourceful, sometimes in ways that skirted the edge of honesty. If she thought there was one last trick she could pull, she'd try it. And I had a feeling it was coming soon. Came the next week, right on schedule. I was making tea when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. On the other end was a woman who introduced herself as Officer Daniels with the Jacksonville Police Department. "Ms. Graves, we've received a complaint from a Ms. Denise Parker stating that you've been harassing her," the voice said. "She claims you've been contacting her friends and showing up at her residence uninvited." I felt my jaw tighten. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was strategy. If she could paint me as the aggressor, maybe she thought it would make the court see me differently. "Officer Daniels," I said calmly, "I haven't set foot in Jacksonville since filing my case, and I haven't contacted Ms. Parker except by phone, twice, in response to her calling me. I do, however, have all my communications documented." There was a pause, then the officer's tone shifted. "You have documentation?" "Every call, every message, every timestamp," I said. "And I have a process server who can confirm my only contact has been through legal channels." The officer cleared her throat. "All right, Ms. Graves. This sounds more like a civil dispute than a criminal matter. I'll note your statement." When I hung up, my hands were steady but my stomach churned. This was Denise at her most desperate, twisting the story to make herself look like the victim. Calvin showed up not 20 minutes later after I told him what happened. He let out a low whistle. "Classic misdirection. He's trying to scare you into backing off. Problem is, you've got the receipts, literally." We spent the afternoon making extra copies of every piece of evidence, organizing them into binders. One for me, one for the court, and one just in case. By the time we finished, I felt armored. If she wanted to turn this into a game of narratives, fine. I'd let the facts do the talking, and facts don't rattle under pressure. The week before the hearing, Savannah was drenched in one of those late October rains that made the air heavy and the streets shine like black glass. I spent most of my days inside reviewing my binders until I could recite the timeline in my sleep. 3 nights before court, I was in the middle of folding laundry when my phone lit up with her name. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice was different this time, quieter, almost brittle. "Marlene, I don't want to go to court." "That's easy to avoid," I said. "You know what you need to do." "I don't have all of it," she said quickly, like she was afraid I'd hang up. "But I can get most. Maybe we could work out." "No," I said, keeping my tone even. "All of it plus the filing fee. That's the only deal." There was a long pause, the kind where you can almost hear the other person's thoughts turning over. "You're really going to let a judge decide this?" she asked finally. "Yes," I said. "Because a judge will look at the facts and the facts are on my side." She didn't argue. She just muttered something I couldn't make out and hung up. The next day I got a certified letter in the mail from her. Inside was a money order for $2,000 along with a handwritten note. "This is all I can manage right now. Please call me so we can settle the rest." I set the money order on the counter and stared at it. $2,000 was tempting, a sign she might actually be feeling the pressure, but it was also a trap. If I cashed it, she could claim I'd accepted partial payment as a settlement. That night, I drove to Calvin's and slid the envelope across his kitchen table. "Hold on to this until after the hearing," I told him. "You're playing it smart," he said. "Don't let her buy her way out with half measures." The rain kept falling outside, steady and unhurried. And I realized I felt the same way, steady, unhurried. The storm could rage all it wanted, but I was almost at the finish line. The morning of the hearing, I woke before sunrise. I made coffee but barely drank it. My stomach was a knot of anticipation, not nerves. I'd done my homework. I had every scrap of evidence in my bag, organized so neatly even my old principal would have been impressed. Calvin insisted on driving me to Jacksonville. "Moral support," he said, though I suspected he also wanted to witness the look on Denise's face when she realized the game was over. The courthouse was a squat beige building that smelled faintly of old paper and floor polish. In the hallway outside the courtroom I spotted her immediately. She was wearing a blazer that didn't quite fit and had her hair pulled back too tightly, as if trying to package herself into something respectable. But her eyes, they darted everywhere but at me. When our case was called, we stepped forward. The judge, a silver-haired man with reading glasses perched low on his nose, glanced at the file. "Ms. Graves, you're seeking repayment of $4,800 plus fees. Ms. Parker, you've been served and have had the opportunity to respond. Are you prepared to proceed?" Denise tried to open with a speech about personal hardship and misunderstandings between friends, but the judge cut her off. "We're here for facts, Ms. Parker. Not character testimony." That set the tone. I walked him through the bank transfer, the text message promising repayment, the months of silence, and finally the service of the summons. Every time she tried to interject, he held up a hand. "You'll have your turn." When it came, her turn was short. She admitted to taking the money, admitted to not repaying it, and claimed she intended to, but had been overwhelmed by life. The judge listened, then flipped back through my binder. "Ms. Parker, intention doesn't cancel debt. Judgment in favor of Ms. Graves for the full amount plus court costs." His gavel came down with a sharp crack. It was over in less than 20 minutes. Outside, she caught up to me on the courthouse steps. "You didn't have to humiliate me," she said quietly. I met her eyes for the first time that day. "You did that yourself, Denise. I just asked for what was mine." Calvin and I walked back to his car without looking back. The Florida sun was hot on my shoulders, but I felt lighter than I had in a year. 2 weeks later, a cashier's check arrived in my mailbox. The full $4,800 plus the filing fee. No note, no apology. And I didn't need one. Because in the end, I'd gotten something far more valuable than an apology. Proof that I could stand my ground no matter who was on the other side. A month after the check cleared, I was back to my routines. Mornings on the porch with coffee, afternoons tending the garden, Sundays at church. Life had settled into its familiar rhythm, but something in me had shifted. I used to think drawing hard lines in friendships was cold. That letting go of someone you'd known for decades was a kind of failure. Now I understood it differently. Boundaries weren't walls, they were fences. They kept the good in and the bad out. Denise never tried to contact me again. I heard through the grapevine that she'd moved on to another city, maybe another fresh start. I didn't feel angry about it anymore. She was no longer my responsibility. One evening, Calvin and I were sitting on my porch swing, watching the sun sink over the rooftops. He sipped his sweet tea and said, "You know, you didn't just get your money back. You taught her and everyone watching that you're not someone to walk over." I smiled at that. Not because I'd set out to prove anything to anyone, but because he was right. The money was just the visible win. The real victory was the quiet knowledge that when I needed to stand up for myself, I didn't flinch. The magnolia tree rustled in the warm breeze, its branches heavy with blossoms. I thought about how deep its roots ran, how it had weathered every storm the past 30 years. Strong, steady, taken. Just like me,